All right, we're live. So my name is Waylon Lewis with Elephant Journal, and I am here with Andy Horning, who is also in Boulder. But, you know, just as a little shout out to the pandemic, we're still doing it separately, just for old time's sake. It's hard to let go of our masks and such.
Yeah, Waylon, thank you for having me on.
It's genuinely my honor. I'm super excited about this one. So months ago, I interviewed Liz Plank. I've mentioned her a few times. She wrote a whole book about toxic and also about basically good masculinity. And we have a similar subject to get into today, which is white men. They are not very popular these days for a lot of good reasons, or a lot of bad reasons they're not popular. So you wrote a whole book. What can you show us the book, Grappling?
Sure, it's Grappling. White Men's Journey from Fragile to Agile.
Okay, so there's so many places we could start here, but I think, you know, we kind of touched on it in our little green room conversation, which is, you know, white men, we talk all the time. We want to like write books. We want to run for political office. Like, haven't we heard enough from white men? Why a book about white men?
Yeah, I think at one point in the writing of this book, I had a friend who said, really? But more about white men? And it was like, yeah, actually, yes. Yeah. In fact, this group in particular has so much, and we also have so little when it comes to our internal world. Our power is potent, but it's also problematic.
Yeah, I feel like you were pointing at me directly when you said we have so little. So yeah, I mean, we have like privilege, and we have toxic masculinity, and then we have shame, and we have confusion on the other end. You know, for those of us who are awake to the fact that maybe this privilege and toxic stuff isn't good for us or good for anyone else, and it really, what is bad for the world is bad for us as well. We're a victim of the patriarchy, like anyone else, or the toxic patriarchy. And tell me where I'm wrong. And then there's the shame and confusion for those of us who are vaguely awake to it. But there's this whole middle area, and your book hits that like Mickey Mantle hitting a home run. So what is the opportunity here?
Yeah, I love that. What is the opportunity? So I think, but you mentioned shame. I think one of our original sins is slavery as a country. And so shame is a natural outgrowth of that. And when I was a therapist, I certainly worked with people around their interior worlds. That was the basis and the gist of a lot of what people came in for, to feel better, to know themselves better. And then I came upon anti-racism work and the work of whiteness, and realized that the thing I saw in the therapy room was the same thing that I was seeing with white people. There was that fear, that shame, that unexamined feeling world that was causing people to shut down.
And so, yeah, tell me more about, because I write a lot of articles on elephant, like from a Buddhist point of view, shame. I feel like shame is kind of a good thing. And on social media, we're all so defensive. You're shaming me. And I'm like, well, shame is taking responsibility, and then you can grow out of that, but you don't want to sit in the shame forever.
I think, you know, when it comes to shame, we are at the very beginning of understanding it. It just hasn't been in our verbiage in the lexicon very much. And so we have a kind of a primitive understanding of it. And I love that the Buddhists sort of say, well, what can I learn from shame? Because shame is such a debilitating feeling that we'll do anything to avoid the feeling of shame.
It's so kind of advanced. It's so intelligent. You know, it's trying to avoid the feeling of shame, but it's still saying, I hate myself, I'm awful. But you're still avoiding. It's another way. You talk a lot about grappling, about avoiding discomfort. It's still avoiding that tender discomfort, awkward thing.
Absolutely. I think part of, you know, fragility, the term came from Robin DiAngelo's work around her work in anti-racism work. And then agility, Susan David, a Harvard teacher and researcher, wrote about emotional agility. And so I think that's the way out, is to be agile around our feelings, to be adept at the shame that kind of can wash over us and through us, and to let it go to the other side.
How do we do that? I mean, because so you also said in our green room, which I loved, you said, I forget how you said it, but you want this to be pragmatic, not theoretical.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
how do we stick with it instead of running away from that pain? Because we're always quoting Brene Brown and Pema Chodron and, vulnerability and bravery. And then I've had two instances in the last week, one of them today, where I got to a really uncomfortable place and I was like, okay, bye. Peace out.
I think I love your honesty, Waylon. I love your honesty. Yeah, that it is in the end all we have, and I think that's part of the answer, which is just to be honest with ourselves about what's happening. We don't need to hide or run or, scuttle some stuff or only look at this, don't look over there. It's like, look, white people have been conditioned, white men in particular, have been socialized. We've been conditioned, especially around our feelings, to not feel, to see vulnerability as weak,
Right.
to stay in our intellects, to cut off from our bodies, our sensations. And so the first way in is to acknowledge feelings. I'm feeling uncomfortable. Wow, this is hard. And to own that it's hard in part because we haven't been encouraged to do it. And that's a good first step.
What's that?
Well, that's just a good first step.
Yeah, so I love that, and it feels easy to do that. Like next time I'm feeling super in pain or vulnerable, I just say that makes me feel really vulnerable or in pain. But I feel like that reminds me of like, what is it, non-aggressive communication or whatever?
Passive aggressive or
no, it's a whole technique.
Yeah.
And that
non-violent communication.
Thank you. And I respect the spirit behind it, and I know very little bit about it. So I don't mean to be disrespectful to anyone out there who loves it, but I used to have a mentor, kind of boss person, who would speak in nonviolent communication. I hear what you're saying, what I'm hearing, and I'd be like, oh, shut up. Just like, it felt like a crutch that was awkward and insincere. So how do we just repeat how we're feeling instead of running away?
Yeah, I think we have to preload an understanding so that when an incident happens, like it happened today for you, you would have done some kind of cognitive work, read a book or two, had some conversations to know that feeling is an opportunity. That's a chance to grow. That's where I go towards it rather than away from it. The definition of grappling is engaging in a close struggle without weapons. And so the first part is engage in the struggle. Don't let the struggle engage you. Like, go towards it. Be like, what is this thing? Like, damn. And you take agency over your own struggle as opposed to feeling like a victim in it. But the second part is without weapons. And so often in the personal growth world that I'm in, we weaponize awareness. It's like, what's wrong with me? I figured it out, but I still do it anyway. And every new epiphany we get, we kind of use against ourselves. So,
yeah. So grappling is an interesting term. Why did you? I mean, I read about why you did, but why did you choose that as the title of your book? Because your book could have been titled something much more like clickbaity, like "White Men Suck" or something.
Yeah.
White men waking up. Yeah. Why?
I think
grappling, you're still kind of fighting a little bit, or are you?
No, you are. It is absolutely a struggle. But you're not. One of the problems with white men, if we can be so explicit, is that we get defensive. we get
Yeah, we do.
reactive. We tend to rationalize and like, well,
Yeah.
is that really true? And we get up in our head trying to. And
Yeah.
so part of grappling is to say, let me not do that, because the net effect of defensiveness is that it causes the discussion, the dialogue, the internal journey to stop. It doesn't go much further.
Right.
I'm not racist. End
Right.
of the conversation. I'm
Right.
not sexist. End of the dialogue. And so grappling says, hey, roll up your sleeves and dig in, have fun with it, get courageous around it.
It is fun, because then you have actually, like Trungpa Rinpoche, this Buddhist teacher, talked about cocoon, and we all want to be safe and cozy in our little cocoon. And he said, but the problem is the air is stale, and all of us inherently want fresh air. So we open up the window, and then we're vulnerable, and it's scary, but it's also fun. It's like, wow, a whole world. Like when I traveled, I had never traveled because I had grown up pretty poor, and I finally traveled, and I was like kind of good at it. And I was so surprised. I was like so terrified of traveling, frankly, because I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm out of my envelope or whatever. And then you're like, wow, I can do this. It's like being a 2-year-old and you see them learning something new. So it is fun. And I think that gets lost in this conversation. But it also is heartbreaking, because you realize white men have been coached and encouraged and rewarded and punished all around our ability or lack thereof to win. Like that word Donald Trump is obsessed with, winning, is everything for us. We have to be loud and strong and mean and rich and successful. And if we're not, shame, right?
Yeah. Waylon, I am so inspired by the cocoon metaphor, and then the air gets stale. I mean, I think this is the important thing, is this is not just navel gazing. We're not just engaging in this internal world. The way in which we grow is by doing the internal work and then bringing it outward, engaging with the world, navigating complex problems that live today, trying to understand what is happening out there. And then going back to the cocoon to reflect and learn. And then sometimes the air gets stale, so go back out in the world. We've got to build our muscle of engagement with the world and discomfort, and with the inner world and discomfort.
And avoiding discomfort is actually cowardly. So even from a toxic masculinity point of view, we have to engage in discomfort. We should, because we're not scared, right? We have to go for it, and we have to be okay with being scared and not run away from that.
Yeah, and not just run away from it, but make that the enemy. Like you and I have been conditions where when we feel afraid, it's like, don't go there. That means fill in the blank, bad, weak. And so we have to sort of unlearn I guess maybe part of grappling is unlearning and relearning all that we've been socialized, so that we can show up better in the world around us.
So how do you, what can you tell me about your own journey a little bit, as if we were just like hanging out, having a coffee or a beer or something? Like, you grew up as a white man with some inherent privilege, obviously, societally, and then also in your life. What has your journey been? How have you learned to really digest this so it's not just philosophical?
Yeah, thank you. I realized early on that, one of the things I share is that I was looking at a privilege bingo card. Like, in bingo, the goal is to fill as many spaces as you can. And this was like white, straight, raised Christian, male, from inherited income. I mean, there were multiples, and I'd fill that space. Yeah, I'd fill that space. Yeah, Phil. And when you look at this thing, it's like you cannot not look at it. And so my way of dealing with things is like, I'm not gonna pretend that I earned it. That's me. I have to acknowledge where I came from, and because it's so obvious.
And none of us can deny that if you do have success, even if it doesn't look like how society thinks success is, but if whatever success you feel like you do have earned, you might have earned that, but you earned it on top of all the bingo, that you've seen that video with the race where everyone's having a race, but then they say, hey, if you grew up in a secure home with loving parents, take 5 steps forward. And if you grew up with money, if you grew up white or cisgender, or, all these things. And then, you see some people are starting like 100 feet up.
I mean, I think one of the feelings that white men in particular need to really embrace, like consciously say, I'll take one of those every time they feel, is humility, humbleness.
Mm-hmm.
I just think we haven't been taught, among all the stuff you and I just talked about, that feeling is just not something and so when you tell that story, I can even feel like the humility, the humbleness that is necessary to digest the fact that I had a head start and people that look like me have head starts.
So what do you do with privilege?
You acknowledge it, you own its gift, you own the cost of it to the people who don't have privilege. So if I can own that I got a head start, I also have to turn and look back and say, oh, shit, who else didn't get what I got? And then bring that into my psyche, like work with that. Don't just overemphasize my efforts, like own the reality of it and feel it as not a diminishment of me.
Mm-hmm.
We don't choose the form we come into, but as I say, it's not our fault, but it is our responsibility.
Right. So then what do you do, like when you look at everyone behind you in line who is of equal value as a human being, but they didn't, like if you're racing to the lunch table and there's only 10 lunches and you get a lunch and people who are up with you get the lunch, but then there's a bunch of people left behind. What do you do? I mean, what do you actually concretely do to share that privilege or give it away or I don't know.
I think one, you stay with the question. This question you're asking, like, what am I going to do about this? Okay, this is true. Now what? Now what? And I sort of hold that question over and over again. But one of them is to be a learner. I think we have to embrace the learning. And so much like you, ever since this book came out, I have been called out and called in. Just yesterday, I was on a phone call with a woman, a Black woman, who said, you should have been a better ally to me, and you could have been a better ally by sending me a signal that you were safe, that you understood the dominant power system. And I wish you had done that in our work together. And I was really...
you had worked together for a time, but you hadn't said, look, I'm aware of where I'm at and where you're at societally.
Absolutely. And in fact, I went into a little bit of shame in that moment because I was like, that is so insanely obvious. I cannot believe that I missed it. I was disappointed in myself. Like, this is some of the work I'm doing. And so I have to just say, keep going. You're learning, keep going. And then she also helped me with a deeper understanding of what it means to be an ally.
Yeah, that's very confusing, the ally thing, because, then you get called a white knight, or there's all these like different terms where you're like, wait, I'm just trying to help. And then they're like, F you for trying to help. Who do you think you are? Get out of here. This is our thing. Shut up. For once, shut up.
That's right.
Like, wait, I was trying to, it's not about you. Oh, right.
Yeah.
It's hard. I think that's why so many, and playing the littlest violin that I inherited at birth, so many white men shrink from this conversation because you're like, look, I may be wrong in my little bubble of privilege, but at least I know where I'm at, because the second I step out, everyone criticizes me. There's no winning. There's no making anyone happy. No one is you. I interviewed Jane Elliott she's a anti-racism teacher.
Okay, yeah.
And in the green room, I should have said it on video because I got savage in the comments. But in the green room, I said, hey, I'm a white guy. Like, tear me apart in this video. Don't hold back.
Yeah.
Use me so people can just see your work in process. And she did, and it was amazing. I'm crying, and all the comments are like, this white guy wasn't ready, like, haha, social media comments. And I was like, no, but that was the point.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Waylon,
like I couldn't win. Like, I wasn't trying to win, but I was trying to be a model, like someone shutting up and taking it and opening up.
Yeah, Waylon, a couple quick things. One is, you're right, we don't get awards, we don't get acknowledged. Right. Look, you did it right, yay. That will never happen, and we shouldn't expect that.
Right.
But what we can do is nurture ourselves. I use the metaphor, as simple as it is, of a car. And so we've got to nurture ourselves, which fills up the gas tank. Because you're right, it is hard. And I swear, every time someone says, hey, can I give you some feedback? It's like, okay, yes, you can. I know, I just have to take a deep breath and nurture myself, fill up my gas tank. But a couple more quick things. One is courage. The gas pedal is the courage to step into uncomfortable things. And we got to walk towards conversations and move towards difficult things. And then compassion is the brake pedal. And around steep turns and rocky roads, we have to pump the brakes of self-compassion so that we can nurture ourselves in our learning. Because if we punish ourselves every time we get it wrong, it's over. We're not going to keep stepping out into the learning. And so there is an act of self-care as we also engage with people who look different from us.
And what part of the car or something is it if you're like, you don't know what you're talking about, but you're trying to figure it out, but you don't want to offend them? That also feels like the brakes, sort of, for me, but in a way that might be running away. So maybe that's right. In gears or something.
Yeah, no, but I think part of what you have to do there is put on that accelerator and get it. I think, I don't want to say, look, I'm always going to get it wrong, because then I've given myself a pass. But I do think mistakes are inevitable. Right. Repair is not. You can repair or not repair. And I think that's, as a husband, but also as a white man, I've committed to a life of repair. Because people may look at me as a white man and say, I had a boss like you, or I had a perpetrator like you. And they can engage in that transference. And I can't say, what's your problem? I have to say, I hear that I might remind you of people who've been a problem in your life.
It's hard, though, because you hear every white male voice, even in my own head. You're like, yeah, but that's sort of like stereotype. People are stereotyping you. And then you're like, wait, double stand, you're like, there's no equating that. But there is still this idea that we shouldn't be prejudiced about anyone and say, oh, you're a white man, you're evil because you're a white man. That's not the message here. The message here is taking advantage of privilege and selfishly holding it for yourself and beating others down with it is the problem.
With it. Yeah, and refusing to kind of work with it, like refusing to engage in the understanding. I mean, I think Trump was a provocateur. George Floyd's murder, which is just a little more than a year ago now, and the riots that happened, those are great stimulus. I think part of it is be stimulated so that we can work with what we notice inside of us. And I just think change is the only constant. And as white men, our world is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. 2045, we're going to be a minority, white people are. And so what side of history do we want to be on? We're going to have to learn to deal with a changing world around us. And the first step is to look inward and deal with the feelings associated with the changing world around us so that we don't avoid it. It actually builds a muscle. I call it a moment muscle, so that it gives us a chance to take each interaction and work that muscle so that we grow. I always know that at the end of these conversations I have, or at the end of trying to be a good ally, I grow as a person.
Mhm.
It's incredibly uncomfortable, but I do grow.
Right. And that's how you grow. I always say stress isn't always bad. Like stress is what you do to your muscles when you're exercising.
That's right, Waylon. That is grappling is using stress for growth
Right.
rather than using it to hurt ourselves, because stress also does debilitate.
Totally. If you get, well, just like with the shame, if you get caught up in it and you don't know how to manage it or work with it,
Yeah.
in Buddhism, is Trungpa Rinpoche again said, regret, like shame, is super useful. You should dwell in it for 3 seconds and then move on.
Wait, let me just say, because in the book, there's this researcher, I forget her name now, but she called it the 90-second rule, which is that if we can stay with a feeling for 90 seconds, no matter what the feeling is, her research shows that it dissipates and we move through it.
That's so interesting. Staying with it is different than drowning in it.
Totally. It's nuanced, but it is clear difference.
Yeah. So what to do? Tell us more about the moment muscle. Do I have that right?
Yeah, you do. So, I think other people have, who did it, the 15-second rule or there's other paradigms, but how do we take it as an invitation and answer the call? There is a kind of a hero's journey here of answering the call, not avoiding it, and then going towards the struggle. So seeing who knows what's going to happen in our day today or tomorrow, where we're going to have a choice. And are we going to work with it in the moment? Or are we going to, because it's so easy for us. We can find ways around it. We can say, oh yeah, he's crazy, or you know what, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And instead to go towards it.
Like I'm super evolved. I'm a super evolved white guy. I run elephant. I don't need this crap. No one understands me.
Yeah, that's right.
No credentials. You got to let go. And so the moment muscle is being willing to grapple with the moment.
Yes, grapple in the moment and bring in courage and compassion. Like willingly call those in, and then engage in the learning. I mean, I'll say to myself all the time, okay, what am I learning? What am I learning? What am I learning? I have an example recently where I was called out, and then I said, you're calling me out. And they said, actually, I'm calling you in. And I was like, oh, you are calling me in.
Or on social media? Or?
This was in a conversation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, she said, no, I'm not calling you out. I'm calling you in. And I was like, thank you. Because I started to feel a little like, you know what, come on, man. Yeah, right. Yeah. So earlier I had been, I've been untrained about white silence equals violence. And so in this one meeting I was in that she was in, I spoke up and I called out someone else. And she said, you shouldn't have done that. And my first reaction was, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I learned that white silence equals violence. So I'm speaking up. What's your deal? And what she said to me was, look, as a woman facilitator, you should have turned it back to me because you undermined me as a white male. And that had an impact in that moment.
It's so complicated.
It is complicated, but what I said to myself is, okay, I had one learning, white silence equals white violence. Now I added this other layer of learning of be aware of the facilitator's role in the meeting that you're talking about. And that's a net add. It took me a while to get there, but at the end of it, I'm a better person.
Yeah, I mean, it is complicated in the sense that we learn something about waking up as white men, and then we do the right thing. But then it always turns out the right thing, we weren't thinking about the other right thing, and that makes it the wrong thing. That's what I mean by complicated. And then when we learn that thing, we're like, got it. And then we do that next time, and someone else is probably going to be like, you know what? And then we're like, so you can't win, but you can learn. And I think that's why your book is so helpful that it's a book, that it's not just, it's a journey. You spoke about the hero's journey, that we can go through this journey. It really takes education, not just tweets and yelling at each other on social media. That's why I was asking about that conversation you had. It really takes education, but it takes us being willing to open up that book and being actually looking at it as an opportunity to, because as Liz Plank with her book, For the Love of Men, your book, Grappling, do you mind holding it up again for people who joined?
Thank you, brother.
Grappling, White Men's Journey from Fragile to Agile. Killer. It's one of those cases where the subtitle is so good, you make it as big as the title.
Mm-hmm.
It takes an education. It takes us being interested in realizing that white toxic masculinity and white patriarchy is bad for us as well as them. And that it's fun. I mean, there's sadness and there's heartbreak and there's tenderness along the way, but it's actually more fun to evolve and to learn than to sit and stew in our little,
I tell you, Waylon, like your facial expression, it was like, you feel embattled and embittered and
small,
and small, but it takes the same amount of energy. That defending and building of the wall requires a lot of energy. So where do you want to put the energy? The energy to isolate or the energy to engage? You probably.
Can you just repeat that? Where do you want to put your energy?
The energy to isolate or the energy to engage. It's the same amount.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good, because anyone would look at that question and be like, all right, I guess let's go. I'm scared. I'm still nervous. I still know I'm not going to win.
Yeah.
But I will grow and be happier and more healthy and kinder and all these good things.
Yeah, I love Grappling sort of says, you're afraid? Come on, bring it with you. You're feeling a little small, bring that with you. Like, we're all going, let's go. We're not leaving anybody behind. You feeling a little in shame? You get to come too. Let's keep engaging and keep learning.
Man, you sound like you'd be a great therapist.
Well, Waylon, I thank you. I was going to mention the bike park, because when I was almost done with the book, I took my son to the bike park here in Boulder, and off to the side, maybe you've seen it, is a pump track. And it's only about the size of a basketball court. And it has these little rolling hills. And it's the coolest thing in the world, where the kids don't pedal. They just use the hills, these little hills, to gain momentum. And so they get to move their bodies and they just build speed, and around and around they go with no pedaling, using the downs to gain momentum in the ups. And I said to myself in the moment, like, that's grappling. Because when we go towards it, we come out the other side. At the end of that conversation I had with the woman who called me out / called me in, I got off the phone and I was like, I felt so good, and I was ready for the next thing. It was like, I just did that. What else is there? Who else can I learn and grow from and support and be an ally and show up in the world as a better human being?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I wrote an article on Elephant recently that like 88% of people didn't just disagree with, they hated. And it was about the Buddhist notion of compassion or empathy arises naturally out of our basic goodness. When I put it that way, it sounds nice. But then I titled it Compassion Fatigue. That's not a thing. And so burnout is a thing. We're all going through it in the pandemic. And people like nurses and doctors are burning out, and their work is compassion. But from the Buddhist point of view, true, genuine compassion rises naturally out of your kind of broken, empathetic heart, your basic goodness. And it actually gives you as much as you get, if not more. And it's infinitely renewable. And that doesn't mean that you don't take care of yourself or have boundaries or any of those things, but it just means that compassion or empathy itself doesn't tire you out. It's all of our kind of ego expectations, getting something back or not, that tires us out. And everyone I was definitely strung up, but it was a good conversation. But
I love that. You give as much as you get. It's an enlightened self-interest kind of thing. It
yeah,
regenerates because
yes.
the work continues.
Yeah. No, it
But
really does. We all have that feeling. It's like liquid gold when we actually do something generous or we connect two people and help someone with a solution. It just feels so good.
I just had an insight into the power of the Elephant Journal is
Mm.
to take these teachings, which sometimes can be obscure and abstract and
Yeah,
opaque, and to bring them down here,
yeah,
down now. You
yeah.
and I, give it to me, and you don't want to lose the gold in it, but
No.
you do want to make it understandable. So
Yeah.
that's what a great thing you're doing.
Well, my second book I'm actually writing. It's funny you say that, and we'll skip past this. It's not about my book, but
That's all right. Let's go.
in my second book, my first book was about love and relationships, broken heart. You may remember a little because
It's
I was
called
on your podcast.
let, Things I Want to Do with You One Day.
Yeah, close. You
What is
got
it?
85% of the way there. Things I would like to do with you.
Oh, okay.
Things I want to do with you one day. Maybe not today, maybe later. Things I would like to do with you. And the second book is actually, and it was about the Buddhist notion of love and loneliness and relationship. And the second book is about exactly what you said. I call it tent pegging in my mind, but like bringing all the Buddhist stuff down to earth and making it super accessible. And I love what you said about you're not losing the power, but just making it relatable for your daily life.
There's one thing you did right there, and I share this a lot. I'm not sure if I shared it in the book, but metaphor, the
Mhm.
power of metaphor. I
Mhm.
mean, I understood your concept, but when you said tent pegging, it was
Mhm.
like, oh. And I think personal growth and change is hard to navigate. You find metaphors
Yes.
over and over again. What are the metaphors? What are the symbols?
Yeah.
In nature, in the world, in things? What is the metaphor that can support you on your path? It's
Yeah.
an important skill to use to help you.
That makes me think, like, I keep thinking about, I just blogged about the F-150 electric truck coming out. Talk about masculinity. It is like the first truck you look at and you're like, yeah, I might think I hate electric trucks because I love Trump and to hell with these wussy eco liberals. But you see that truck and you're like, whoa, it can power my house for 3 days and there's 12 plugs and it goes farther and faster and there's no range anxiety and it can pull more and it's the same price. You're like, I'm in. And but we need people to work within those kind of metaphors with white men. And from that point of view, like your book is like finding a needle in a haystack, for another metaphor. We need to speak in the language of white men, not that we have one language, but to white men.
Yeah,
So
we
that's
do.
really valuable because
Yeah,
we're getting kind of rightly hollered at by people who, we need to go to them for the language, and that's fine and that's appropriate, but it may not reach beyond the kind of the yous or the me's or people who know that we're kind of in the wrong place and need to move.
yeah, I do think that me being a white man, I can speak like I know this world. I've coached high school sports for years. I've
Huh.
worked with men,
What did
and
you
so
coach?
basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. Do you
what a
still
great
play?
game. Occasionally I do,
Yeah.
although I'm much slower than I used to
You
be.
got to bike over to my house. I have a hoop in the alley.
Waylon, we're doing that.
I am also a lot slower, so you're in good company. I'm like, my knee. Yeah.
But so it is an important thing for us to come together,
Yeah.
caucusing or men's groups or places where we can speak the same language. And then I share the story in the book where Lee Shanis, who works for Intercambio,
Yeah.
uh, he was in this meeting. I used to be on the board of Intercambio, but he's in this meeting. He told me the story right after he called me. He's in this meeting. He's the only white male in the meeting. And they're
Right.
talking about systemic change and how to go about it and talking to city council and to the state government. And the Latino women in the meeting turn to him and say, you got to speak up. And they point at him. He was like, what? Me? He's like,
Yeah.
look, you're a white man. They'll listen to you. You've
Right.
got to speak up. They'll just think we're saying this. And Lee was struck by his role
Right.
was much different than other people's role. And so I think we have to understand the power we have to create change and how potent that can be if we use it for good.
Yeah, I've heard similar stories where, we're told that's how you be an ally. That's how you use your privilege for good. Speak on behalf of his Latina sisters. Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, it's lovely. Good guy. Intercambio is amazing. That's a good way to use your privilege, is to serve organizations like that.
Yeah. So cool. We should. Have you guys done much work with them? I should talk about this after, but let's find a way, Waylon, to bring them. Can we talk about that?
Well, my fiance is Ecuadorian, and she's actually, I've been trying to connect her and Lee, because Lee and I are pals, about her offering free bilingual yoga. She does Spanish, English yoga, so both communities can come together and learn from one another. And it goes both directions, and offer that to the whole Intercambio community. But we just haven't connected, so maybe that could be a start. But yeah, Lee and I bartended with Ryan Van Duzer, who connected us. Some benefit years ago. Yeah, cool.
Waylon, this conversation is so good. You must love this part of your job where you get to reach out and connect with people.
It's so good. Yeah, I do. I feel very privileged, for lack of a better word, because I'm having a hard day in some ways, and then I get to basically get it. It's very auspicious. Again, to reference Buddhism, we call it auspicious coincidence. The timing of you and this book, with what I've been going through, with my inability, despite all my meditation training and my ideas about empathy and hanging in there with discomfort. I've failed to hang in there with discomfort twice in the last, 3 business days. So it's timely. And, I feel that little constriction and pain in my chest, and I run.
Yeah.
Like a jackrabbit, ding, I'm out, bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe part of coming back, it may not be right away, but you reduce the time, right? These people aren't out of your life forever.
No.
So maybe part of grappling is to say, a week ago, and then yesterday, and then I want to run, but I'm not going to, so you just reduce the time there. But, there's one thing at the end of the book I reference, because I think as one of the many conditionings we've had is that we've been told, change the world, make your mark, create your legacy, do your thing. And so that's kind of the mantra we raised. I think the current one is change yourself, then change the world, work on you, then make your mark in the world. And I think grappling for white men in the future, white men in particular, is to, instead of change the world, change yourself, then change the world, it's let the world change you. Let the world shape you. And when I hear those two anecdotes, part of what I hear you doing is allowing the world to shape you. Those experiences are shaping you. They're working on you.
Yeah, that's a very generous way to put it. But no, I do feel that. And yeah, I'm good at coming back and talking about it. Sometimes I create further drama, but I'm good at admitting stuff. I'm just not always good at it's that visceral feeling of kind of fear or vulnerability or discomfort, as you put it in your book.
Yeah, John Gottman said this when he referenced men in marriages. He said in traditional heteronormative marriages that men need to be open to being influenced by their wives. We just have to be open to being influenced by our wives. Yeah. And we see that kind of influence as weakness. And so we have to sort of flip that script and say, actually, if I can let my spouse influence me, if I can let the world influence me and shape me, then I am stronger.
Yeah.
And that is a kind of strength to hold on to your core while allowing the world to shape you. I think that's our path forward. That's the only thing that is going to save white men from themselves, is to just open up to the world around them and say, and surrender and say, okay, let me learn. Let me learn. I clearly don't know. Let me learn. Let me learn. And that's like my mantra. I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn.
That's so good. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me, there's been this viral little video going around. It reminds me that the patriarchy and that racism are internalized by women and by, people of color, not just us. There's this viral video going around of this like couple, and they're all dressed up and they're going out to this like club or fancy restaurant. And the woman is like walking like 2 inches ahead of her partner. And he like pulls her back calmly and like super like macho, pulls her back a little bit. He doesn't even look at her, no eye contact, and walks in front of her. And she goes, "Oh, right." And she like holds his arm adoringly. And that's it. That's the whole video. And the comments are dominated by women saying, "Oh, that is so hot. That is so attractive." Like, we as a culture have been taught that men should lead forcefully, is somewhat forceful in the video. There's no eye contact. And that is attractive. And I think, you reminded me just a few minutes ago, you said, we've been trained from birth, something like that, to how to achieve, how to be respected. And we have to unlearn that stuff. It's all wrong. All of it's wrong.
Yeah. And yeah, I do think that my wife talks about this, the white women who gain power because of their association with the power structure can be problematic in the efforts to change. Well,
right. Like the lady who defeated the Women's Equality Act in the 70s, was it? I'm forgetting my history. Late 70s.
Yeah, who was it?
I was a toddler, so I'll just back out here. But yeah, I mean, some of the most fierce opponents of equity can be those who have figured out, and it makes sense within inequity, figured out how to survive or profit off of toxic systems.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm out of my depth. Well, Andy, such a delight. If you don't mind holding up the book one more time. And
yeah, sure.
Other than Amazon, where can we get it?
I love that. So it's on Bookshop. And also it will be at the Boulder Bookstore coming up. I'm going to do an event there.
Oh, cool. Well, I'd love to personally publicize that. And bookshop.org is sort of a co-op owned by all the independent bookstores. So go to bookshop.org, look for Grappling, and support this great work. We all know a confused white male to give it to. So go out there, and it's the gift of the season.
And confusion is the birthplace of growth and learning. So celebrate confusion.
Celebrate confusion. I need to watch this video again, and I'm in it. Thank you so much, Andy Horning. Grappling. And what's the subtitle again? White Men's Journey from Fragile to Agile.
You got it.
Got it. All right. Andy, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Waylon. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. See you in person soon.
Yep.
And we're out.